a joint deep down in my heart. I'm waking up with your love from the start. I'm chasing the rainbow through the rain. I know it's gonna be a beautiful day.
How can we say goodbye to the way things were so we can embrace the future God has for us? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coffee. You know what it stands for. Coffee stands for Conversations of Friends of Faith to encourage and equip. I'm Kim Crabill, so delighted to be your host and so excited about today's show. You know, many of us are going to find that life isn't everything that we thought it was going to be, but that doesn't mean that it can't be more than we ever imagined. And that is the heart and the message of today's guest. She is going to answer this question that I posed at the beginning, plus so many more. So it is my honor to bring on to our show today and welcome Tracie Miles. Tracie, welcome to Coffee.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Kim.
Oh, I'm so delighted to have you. I love your book, God's Got You, and it is about letting go so that we can step into new seasons of our lives. Tracie, when I look about who you are and what you've done, which I want to introduce you just a bit to our audience, you have not only written this book, you're a best-selling author of 7 books. So before we leave today, I want you to be able to tell our audience where they can find all these. You are you help people write, I think, with Proverbs 31 Ministries. We'll talk about that. You're the founder of Living Unbroken Divorce Recovery Program. Well, that is so important. You have a lot going on, and I think what I see in all this is that you have a heart for those who hurt and have been hurting. Is that a good summation?
It is. Just over time, just through my own experiences and seeing God not only walk me through a healing journey, but turn pain into a purpose, which just becomes the biggest healing balm that we can experience. It's just given me a passion from day one to really help other women and men also. Help a lot of men. A lot of men read my website and devotions and things. But, I've really been in women's ministry for over 20 years. So that is just my passion, is just to help women realize that they can live life to the fullest no matter what they've been through or what seems to lie ahead.
You know, it sounds cliche-ish when we say turning our pain, giving it purpose, but it's really not, is it? I mean, that is the truth. Explain that just for a minute.
That's what's really driven me since I first started just kind of really following God with a new passion. Is when I started using something that happened to me in my college years, which was very, very traumatic that I went through. And then I hid that pain for many, many years. It was a shameful secret. I didn't want to talk about it. But then when God just called me to do that, and he's like, go and share. And that's a whole story in itself that we don't have time for today. But it was a miraculous turning point in my life where I specifically heard God say, go and share. And I recognized, took me a little time to process. And then I'm like, wait, are you asking me to go and share this part of my past, this, secret that's been just hidden in my heart, that my own struggle? And of course, his answer was yes. And of course, my answer was no. I don't think I'm going to do that. So for about 5 years, I didn't do that. And I served in women's ministry at my church and just other areas, volunteering with Proverbs 31 at the time. And when I finally got the courage to just step out in faith and share that story, it was just an automatic eye-opening that look what God can do when you are vulnerable, when other people realize she's not just preaching from up here. She's been in our shoes and she understands. Everyone's like, me too, me too. Thank you for sharing. And that just like put a fire under me to continue doing that. And that's every experience that I've been through has been different. Of course, we all have, as life goes on, different things happen, good and bad. And each one God has used for something good. And so it's amazing to see how things can come full circle, and that his word is true when it says all things are possible, but that he can also use all things for good for those who are called according to his purpose. And it's amazing to see.
Tracie, what you've just described is everything that my heart longs to do. And that's why I was so anxious to meet you, because I feel like the same passion runs through our veins. the same with me. You know, my first curriculum, my first book, which is now a global curriculum that we use, is called Burdens to Blessings. And it's about helping women. You'll have to come help me sometime. It's about helping women. I help them disclose in a very safe way the deepest hurt and secret pain that they have. I help them be able to share it in a way that no one knows it's their hurt and their pain, just to get it out of them so that they can see other people's eyes when they hear that, so they understand that it is safe to be vulnerable, and that the shackles of shame, guilt, and regret that the enemy has tied them up in is just to keep them silent. Because when we give our deepest wounds to God, he can miraculously turn those into a voice of hope to others. And that is my passion, Tracie, beyond. I mean, it's what wakes me up in the morning, is because I experience that healing hope, like you said that you have. And it's like we're modern day Samaritan women. It's like we run to tell everybody, come see what Jesus can do for you. And isn't it amazing, though, Tracie, how when God calls us to be that vulnerable, the first thing is like, no, I can't do that. And why do you think that is?
Well, I think for one, it's just our own insecurities. It's not, it doesn't matter how faithful we are, how much we go to church, you know, those are all things that we do because we love the Lord, but it's just normal to not want other people to know your dirty laundry. And it's normal to want everyone to think, you know, you kind of got it all together. Like, you're fine. You've never messed up. But then when we do, that's also normal. And
Yes.
there's not, you know, we're all sinners. We've all made mistakes. And so just to be able to understand that we're not the only ones,
Yes.
and that us being willing to be open about that gives other people the opportunity to not have to live in shame and secrecy either, or just to recognize that maybe they didn't do something that they regret, you know, like a lot of us have, myself included, but maybe something really tragic happened and they're just scared to open up and really share their true emotions. And divorce is one of those things. And I've written about that for several years now.
Yes.
And it's just been such a joy to see God use my words to help other women navigate that journey of divorce and realize that, you know, the end of your marriage is not the end of you. It's
Right.
just that it's the end of a chapter that you didn't know was going to close.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that for anyone who's listening today is that, you know, the message in this first part is that no matter what you've gone through, no matter what you have done or what has been done to you, no matter what surprises there are in life, it wasn't a surprise to the Lord. And he says, come to me, you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And that rest means reversal. He wants to do something. You know, the Bible says with man, it is impossible. So we can't do it on our own, but with God, all things are possible. So, you know, I would just say, try God, trust him and trust someone else with your hurts and with your pains, because I will tell you, just like what Tracie just told you, I've lived it too. I know the healing power of some things that I never thought that God would even want to get close to. So that's a little side note, Tracie. I didn't know we were going to share that, but it is a message for today, because somehow we get in our mind that as believers that we have to present perfectly and polished, and we forget that the way we truly connect is by sharing the hurts and pains and how God got us through that. We all need that. Well, let's get over to your book really quickly, because this is a great book. God's Got You. It's a wonderful book. On a side note, let me tell you, I was introducing someone at a convention last year. You'll like this. And I had just read something of yours. I can't remember what it was, but I remember thinking, you know, I really love her heart. And I'd been reading. And that evening I was introducing someone around, from, I guess, 500 ladies were there, and men. I introduced her. She's Tracie something. I introduced her as Tracie Miles.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I had you on my mind that long ago.
Well, that's sweet, but I hate that for her.
I know. I caught myself, you know, it's like one of those moments, but I just thought I thought you might enjoy that. All right. In your book that we just talked about, you talk about life quakes. Tell us what is a life quake, and what does that mean? Have we all
Well,
had quakes?
absolutely. We've all had life quakes, and everybody goes through different things. And that term just kind of, I don't know if I came across it or if God just kind of brought it to my mind one day, but I mentioned divorce earlier, and that is something that in the past decade has been something that I've been navigating. And thankfully, I'm kind of on the other side of that with still, things that you have to deal with every day. But if there's one thing that's constant about life, it's change. Change
Yeah.
will always be constant. And each time we experience any type of change, whether it's just something that kind of happened that we didn't even recognize was happening. We entered a new season of life. We had a milestone birthday, or you have a baby, or you get married, or you lose a loved one, or you start a new career, you move to a new city. Anything that happens that's change in our life is a huge transition period. And
Mhm.
that's really what this book was birthed out of. Many of my books leading up to this have talked about a lot of different topics. But then I kind of got to this point to where I wanted women to understand, okay, you're in this transition season. You either knew it was coming or it took you by surprise, but either way, it's kind of upset your life. And
Yeah.
for major traumatic things like divorce or some of the other more tragic things I mentioned that are a part of all of our lives at times, that kind of turns your life upside down. It's like an earthquake has hit your life and everything's fallen apart. Some things seem to have fallen through the cracks. There seems to be destruction and debris everywhere. And you just wonder, how am I going to put my life back together? Or what am I going to do now that I've passed this season of life? Whether maybe it's an empty nester. That's a life quake for me. When I
Yeah.
experienced that, I was like, oh my gosh, who am I? What am I supposed to do with my life now? And my time and my career and just who am I? I'm not a wife. I'm not necessarily a full-time mother. And
Yeah.
it's a difficult situation. And so that's really the meaning of life quake. It's just doesn't have to be something explosive. It has to be anything that just kind of pivots your life in a new season, a new transition period that you're having to walk through. And you got to figure out how to do that well.
And that can happen at any time. It's not just for the elderly or the retired or
Mhm.
it can happen at any moment to anybody. And so, yeah, I love that. Okay. So when you're feeling stuck, when this life quake happens, and you're starting to feel stuck, tell us, I love the practical application of your book. What's one of the first steps that we can, help to kind of move us forward?
Mhm. Well, in my opinion, and this is just what I've learned in my own experience, is acceptance. If
Yes.
we don't accept that, okay, this is not the way I thought my life would look. This is not where I wanted to be at this stage in my life. This is not what I envisioned my future to look like. All of that can be true, but if
Mhm.
we just refuse to accept it and we stay mad at God or mad at ourselves or mad at our situation, then nothing's going to change. We're going to be stuck and paralyzed in a season either of discontentment or unhappiness or negativity that we don't want to be in. We can't live a positive life if we have a negative outlook.
Right.
So if we don't embrace, we have to accept it first, rather, and then embrace whatever God has in store and just trust that He's done all these amazing things in our life thus far. So we have to trust that He's going to do them again. But I think acceptance is really the very first step we can take before we can begin opening the door for God to do all those good things that we're dreaming about and wishing would happen.
Absolutely. I'm flipping through your book. There was something here. I have so many things marked here, but one thing that I really wanted to talk about, because I think this is important, also is on page 77. You talk about mistakes to avoid. Let's talk about that, because sometimes it's easier to know what not to do and trying to figure out what to do.
Mhm.
So can you take a few minutes and talk about that to our audience and to our friends here?
I'm a huge proponent of positive thinking. And
Yeah.
so that you use the word like we don't want to be cliche a few minutes ago, but that is actually a game changer.
Yeah.
You're either going to be positive or you're going to be negative. And so I truly believe that that stumbling block, that mistake that we can make is not only just not trusting God, that he's got our life in his hands and that he's got our next step in, our next chapter in his hands. But if we don't have the faith to believe it,
Yeah.
then again, we're not opening that door for him to do it, whatever it is that we want him to do. But staying stuck in that negative mindset keeps us stuck. And I did that. So I did that for a couple years after my ex-husband left, and I went through a couple years of just thinking, my life is over. I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to be on the street. My children aren't going to have food. I can't get a job because I was speaking and writing for many, many years, which I loved, and doing corporate training also on the side because I had quit my corporate job because God had called me out of that like several
Right.
years earlier. So
Right.
the finances were a huge issue. How is God going to provide?
Right.
And it was hard for me to think positive.
Mhm.
And I had this revelation one day, because right before I got separated, just a few months before, and the separation was just, my whole life turned upside down in one day. It wasn't like, we had problems for quite a while, but then everything just kind of blew up one day, and then there was no turning back. And so I had to figure it all out from there. But just prior to that, I had received my book contract for two new books with my publisher. And so, of course, I think throwing in the towel, ministry can no longer be done. Who am I to encourage anyone? I have
Right.
nothing happy to say. I'm not a happy person right now. And so I was just confident that I could not write
Mhm.
that book. And it's a long journey, but I did write that book, and it's called
Mhm.
Unsinkable Faith. And the book is about transforming your mind, which changes the way that we think, feel, and live.
Mhm.
And that book came out of my journey. I don't write any of my books out of, I have triumphed, I've had victory here, now everyone learn from me. That's so not me. I'm more of, I am walking in this dirt with you, and God uses in my life, he uses my writing to really heal my own heart. And as I'm walking out the journey, I'm writing what he's teaching me. I'm researching the topic. I'm learning so much. And that becomes part of my own healing process. And then by the end of the book, I can see this is what I want to teach other women. This is what I want to encourage them with. And
Mhm.
so that was my truly first step, is just accepting, okay, this is what God had for me. Like you said, this didn't take him by surprise, that he has done incredible things through that very difficult circumstance in my life, which I would not have chosen. But I
Mhm.
also kind of wonder, you know, I don't doubt what God was doing at all, but I have to ask myself, why did I think that nothing could be good again? Because
Yeah.
it can't. And I remember that moment when God really just opened my eyes to see, you can have joy again. You
Yeah.
can be happy again. It may not be the life that you thought, but it's the life that I planned for you. And our thinking and being able to capture our thoughts and stop thinking negatively, stop letting the enemy infiltrate everything that we think. And this woe is me attitude, that's a make or break
Yep.
situation for moving forward in any transition that we're going through.
Absolutely. It's huge amen to everything you just said. Acceptance is one thing that I help people acknowledge all the time as a Christian counselor. It's just seeing where you are is where you are, and where you are
Mhm.
is okay. It may not feel good, we may not like it, but it's where we are. It's a new beginning. It's a new chapter. And as those thoughts that you were talking about, again, it's like the acceptance. I always say you have to acknowledge the thoughts that you have, and when you acknowledge them, you have to recognize them. And as you recognize the thoughts that you're having, so many times we don't even understand the power of our thoughts, do we, Tracy? And so
Mhm.
when you recognize them, then you can choose to reject them so that you can replace them with God's word. And but the battle, we hear it all the time. And I didn't mean that you were being cliche-ish. I just meant that the things that we can say sometimes
Right.
to the world can sound that way, but they're really not. It's
Yeah.
it's the truth. That was the point I was trying to make. I don't think I was trying to say that you were. It's just
No, I didn't think that at all.
good. Because as believers, as non-believers, they can start thinking, well, I've heard that before. Well, you've
Mhm.
heard it before because it's true,
Right.
right? It's true. Well, let me ask you this. How much does having confidence to move forward happen? Having a lack of self-confidence is, as we know, the confidence to step out is really a global crisis. It really is.
Mhm.
We tend to bow to what other people think or what other people say. So how have you learned through the writing, through your experiences, which I think we do our best writing, our best songwriting, our best ministry, speaking through the things that God has gotten us through. I think that's our own individual. But how has doing that increased help maintain your confidence to do, even though you battle with what you just said? You're not, who can you encourage with what you've been through? We all hear that.
Mhm.
But it really is an equipping for us to even do greater work, the things we've gone through. But how do you stay confident in that?
Well, there's a difference in my opinion that I kind of uncovered as I was writing God's Got You, and that's talking about courage and confidence and how those two are married. And
Yeah.
for some reason, I can only attribute God for doing this, but for some reason, I remember this little tiny phrase in a movie that I watched years and years ago. It was called We Bought a Zoo. And I won't go into the whole storyline, but this family bought a zoo and they had lost their wife and mother. And the dad ended up telling the little boy, because he was very frustrated, and encouraging him, you just got to have 20 seconds of insane courage, and God can do incredible things. Incredible things can happen in your life. And so that just kind of stuck with me for all these years. And then when I started talking about confidence and courage, because I would venture to say most of my life, I didn't have a lot of confidence. Things that had happened as a child, things that had happened in my workplace, things I'd heard people say to me, um, situations with my husband, words that were said that were hurtful. All those things just tear apart our self-esteem and our self-confidence. But the difference is, if we have just those 20 seconds of courage and we step out and we trust God and we do that thing that seems impossible and we're optimistic about that, we see what God can do. We start seeing little glimpses of who we can be, and that builds our confidence. And then with each next step, we build more confidence, and God can do incredible things when we start believing in ourselves and believing in what he can do through us. So in my opinion, courage comes first, those steps of bravery, and then confidence builds over time and with each step of obedience to where God is calling you to act.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think that's so important for people to understand that confidence is something that you don't just have all this confidence to do what God's called you to do because you're a believer. I think it's so important for the world, the outside world, to see we're battling to do what God wants us to do. It's
Mhm.
not, it's not, it's not something that's just poured into us. Maybe a little bit, but we have to build on that, just like our faith has to be built. Um, there's so many, and I want our listeners to please order the book. It's just and all your books. But what you do, Tracie, is you break it down. Talk about how you've written this book, where you've written the chapters, and then you have the moving forward, the plan for it, and the act on it. And then pray over it. I want our listeners to understand that it's an interactive book. It calls you
Mhm.
into the word to help you work it out in your life. So if you just explain that a little bit, I think that's a very important component of what you put together here.
Yeah. Well, in all of my books, I try to leave each chapter, I try to leave the reader with something to do, something to implement, because I'm a huge believer in action.
Yes.
I'm a productive type person, and so I truly believe that if you don't put into action what you've read or what you've learned, and you just kind of tack it up as, oh, that was encouraging, that was inspiring, oh, I love this quote, then if you're like me, by tomorrow you're going to forget that. And
Right.
you're not going to remember that. So that was kind of my purpose in this book. Is I would say most of the books that I've had prior are really trying to help people work through some of their inner demons, some things that they've dealt with that were painful, and not knowing what the future looks like, and just healing your own hearts. But
Yes.
God really shifted me into, I want to be an encourager. I want to be an inspiration to anyone that's reading the words that he gave me, but I also want them to change their life. So
Yes.
my words can't change their life, but their action based on what they learn can
Yeah.
change their life. And so I kind of shifted a little bit with the end of chapter sections in this book, is that I wanted people to, okay, think about how what you just read in this chapter applies to your life. Now, let's make a plan for it. What can you do? Okay,
Yes.
now what steps are you going to take? Like, act
Mhm.
on it. Like,
Yes.
make a blueprint, because so many people say, I want to achieve this in my life, or I want to overcome this hurt, or I want to get this new degree or lose weight, whatever your goal is. But then there's no plan for it. It's kind of like trying to build a house without a blueprint. It's not going to happen. A year
Yeah.
from now, 5 years from now, you're still going to be wishing or dreaming about this thing. Or it might just be a different embracing a new season of life. It could be as simple as that. What can I do next? Do I need to
Yeah.
go to coffee with my friend and start, reamping my social life? Whatever it may be. If we
Right.
don't make a plan for that, then it's not going to happen. God can make anything happen, but he can't if we're just complacently sitting back waiting for something just to drop in our lap. We have to
Well,
move.
I say all the time, he said to Noah, I'm going to save your people. Now pick up a hammer and build the boat, so it's a call to action. And I love that because it makes it practical and it helps us to understand that we have a part in what God wants us to do. And I love that. Well, we have a couple minutes left. Tracie, first, I'd like for you to tell everyone, give them your website, how to reach out to you, and then I'm going to ask you one final question. So let's let them know how they can reach out to you, get your books, maybe invite you in for a speaking engagement, whatever their need is.
Great. Thank you. Well, my website is just traciemiles.com. So it's easy to find. On there, on my bookstores tab, you can find all of my books. You can read all about them. I also have companion workbooks and journals and all kinds of things that accompany the book that help people take what they've read and put it into action, just like we were just talking about. And you can also learn about my author coaching services. You mentioned helping other writers. And
Yes.
just a couple years ago, I just had this burning desire to take what God has shown me over all the years of writing these books. There are so many people, and we all have a story. We all have an amazing story, and only we can tell our stories, regardless of how many times a different topic has been talked about. And so God just gave me a passion to help people who have that passion to write, get it off the blank page and onto paper. And I've seen so many first-time authors as a result, and it's just really a blessing to see people using their stories. And it's just I'm just so thankful that God has allowed me to be a part of that. And then, as you mentioned, I work with Proverbs 31 Ministries. I'm the director of Compel Pro Writers Training, and we are an online writers training site. So that's all online learning, and mine is all one-on-one coaching with authors and helping them go from an idea to a published book on the shelf. So that's kind of a little bit about me, but it can all be found at traciemiles.com.
Yeah, it's you're walking an anointed life, and I love that. I am so drawn to people who have passions like yours, because I agree. Burdens the blessings, discover the power of your story. That's the tagline. And so everyone does have a story, and everyone has a ministry tucked within them. And how great it is for us to be able to help stir up those gifts and to highlight them and show them the practical application of God's word and being able to walk that out. Love it, love it, love it. All right, we have about 60 seconds left. Tracie, I'm going to end with a question that's actually more toward the beginning of your book, but I just love it. It's on page 42 of your book, and you have highlighted every end is a new beginning if we give it a fighting chance. Would you take the last 60 seconds and speak that hope into those who feel like they don't have a fighting chance? Your quote by Tracie Miles, every end is a new beginning if we give it a fighting chance.
Yes. Well, God showed me during the writing of God's Got You that we can look at new seasons of our life as starting over. We can be negative. Like, I don't want to start over again. Now here I am again, having to start over. That's our general human natural mindset. But if instead we look at starting over as a new beginning, then that's going to change how we can approach that new beginning. And that's when good things are going to start to happen, because new beginnings are our mercies are new every day because of God. And if we embrace our new beginnings rather than think of it as I'm just starting over, then that's going to allow us to start having that courage and building that confidence and be brave and be excited about what God has in store, instead of mourning over the things that we've lost or the seasons that we wish we could go back to. So there's a big difference in starting over and new beginnings, because we're starting with a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom, a lot of years of faith and seeing what God has done. And that can fuel us to believe that he's going to be just as faithful going forward. It's not, we've closed the door on what was, but we're opening the door to a new beginning.
Absolutely. Well, Tracie, thank you so much for joining us. Audience, friends who are listening, the last chapter, is it the last chapter? It's chapter 12. I think it's the last chapter. Starts out, it's time to begin again. It's time to begin again. And on the back of the book, it says, you are worthy of beginning again. We are worthy because Christ has made us that way. Tracie, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to doing more things in the future with you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Friends, thank you so much for joining me for coffee. I love these conversations because we began a conversation that's important, it's practical, it's relevant, and it's one that now you can continue with friends around you to dive into it. So again, Tracie Miles, God's Got You, along with 7 other, I think she said, books. So jump into her website, find out about her, and I just look forward to seeing you next time right here on Coffee. Bye, everybody.